So we're still in 5.8. We're finishing up 30, 60, 90 triangles. And in 1 through 3, these were all similar because I gave you the hypotenuse. And number 4, I gave you the short leg. And short leg is really what you want, because from the short leg, you remember that the two shortcuts are that the hypotenuse equals the 2 times the short leg, and you know that the longer leg equals radical 3 times the short leg. So if I give you the short leg, all you have to do for the hypotenuse, multiply it by 2, and you get 10. All you have to do for the long leg is multiply it by radical 3, and you're done. So this one's really the easiest type of question I could give you. The harder type of question I could give you is not with the hypotenuse, not with the shorter leg, but when it comes to the longer leg. So 5 and 6 are the hardest types of questions. And remember, these are all just 30, 60, 90 triangles, okay? So if I give you the longer leg, this is the only shortcut that I know about. So I'm going to do the shortcut and show you how that is. And if you don't like it, we can do Pythagorean theorem, and I'll show you that secondly. Okay, so I know that the longer leg is 15. I'm going to use the shortcut long leg equals radical 3 times the short leg. Okay, so we know the long leg is 15. We know we have to multiply radical 3 times the short leg, which is x. Now, I'm going to get x by itself. So the opposite of multiplying by radical 3 is dividing by radical 3. And so now I have 15 times radical 3. And remember, we do not like radicals in our denominator. So to get rid of it, we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by radical 3. Because what is radical 3 times radical 3? Well, that's just going to be a regular 3. The radical goes away. And then 15 radical 3 we can't combine, so we just write them together like this. And we're super close to being done. The last thing we need to do is look at the whole numbers. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So your answer is going to be 5 radical 3 for x. So here we have 5 radical 3. We've used this shortcut. The next shortcut is we know all we have to do is take that short leg, which was 5 radical 3, multiply it by 2. So what is 5 radical 3 times 2? Well, you can only deal with the whole numbers. So 5 times 2 is going to make it 10 radical 3. And that's how you can use a shortcut to figure out what x and y are. And this is the hardest type of question. Okay, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to show you how you, instead of using the shortcuts, we can use Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so remember, the 30, 60, 90 is half of an equilateral triangle. Half. So if I drew another part of a triangle, that means that this part would have to be y, and this part would have to be y. And if I put numbers on it, let's say this is 10, and this is, this is 10, and this is 10 too, as well. What would x have to be? Well, x would have to be 5. So instead of saying x and y, I'm going to leave this alone, and I'm going to call this x. And I'm just going to say that y equals 2 x's, because 5 times 2 is going to be 10. Okay, so I'm based on the fact that this is half of an equilateral triangle. If you want to use Pythagorean theorem, you need to say that the shorter leg is x, and that the hypotenuse is 2 times the x. Okay, so now that we can use Pythagorean theorem, since we have only one variable, so I'm going to take, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I know one side is x, one side is 15, and I know that the hypotenuse, instead of it being y, I'm going to say that it's 2x. And now I solve from there. So 15 squared is, that's not it, 225. And x squared we can't do anything with yet. And then 2x squared, 2 squared is 4, and then x squared is x squared. Okay, so now we have an x squared here, we have an x squared here. I'm going to subtract and bring it over. Now I have 225 equals 3x squared. And then I'm going to have to divide by 3. And now what do I have to do? I have to do the radicals, because I have x squared equals 225. So to get that alone, I'm going to have to take the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of 225 over the square root of 3. And the square root of 225 is 15 over radical 3. And then we don't like a radical on the bottom. So what are we going to have to do? Multiply by radical 3, multiply by radical 3, and we're going to get 15 radical 3 over 3. And then we can simplify. and we can get 5 radical 3 equals x. And then y equals 2x. So 2 times this would be 10 radical 3. So Pythagorean theorem is a lot more work, but you can still do it with Pythagorean theorem if that's what you really want to do. Okay, so Pythagorean theorem over here. If this is y, the hypotenuse is going to be 2y. And then you would do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I don't know why I put 3 equal signs, it's fine. And then the legs are y and 9, and the hypotenuse we already said was 2y squared. So if you want to use Pythagorean theorem, this is how you would set it up. If you don't want to use Pythagorean theorem, remember the 2 shortcuts. I'm going to erase some of this because it's driving me nuts. The 2 shortcuts are right here. Okay, so they gave us the longer leg. The only thing we know about the longer leg is that it's radical 3 times the shorter leg, which is y. So I'm going to use that one first. The long leg equals radical 3 times the short leg. So the long leg is 9, and we know that the short leg is y. And to get y by itself, you're going to divide by radical 3. And now you have y equals 9 over radical 3, and we don't like a radical on the bottom. So you're going to multiply the top and the bottom by radical 3, and you're going to get 9 radical 3 over 3. And then this simplifies, and y is going to equal 3 radical 3. So that's for the long leg. To get the hypotenuse, remember, all you have to do is just double it. So to get x, all you have to do is multiply it by 2, and you're going to get 6 radical 3. Okay, you can still do Pythagorean theorem if that's confusing. I realize the radicals are hard. But again, you should have a radical 3 somewhere in the 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay, the last thing, for the most part, I'm going to say for the most part. Okay, last thing we're going to try to do is a word problem, your favorite. And let's see, we'll only do one. We'll do number 7. So an ornamental pin is in the shape of an equilateral triangle. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy I picked this one. Equilateral triangle is so important. Remember, whenever you see the word square, we associate it with the 45, 45, 90 triangle. With an equilateral triangle, you will always associate it with 30, 60, 90 triangle, because when you cut it in half, when you cut a 30, 60, 90 triangle in half, when you cut an equilateral triangle in half, you're going to come up with an equilateral triangle. Okay? Oh my gosh, I just said that backwards again. When you cut an equilateral triangle in half, you get a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay, took me 3 times, but I got it. Okay, so we have an equilateral triangle. It says the length of each side is 6 centimeters long. Josh is going to attach the fastener to the back along AB. Will the fastener fit if it is 4 centimeters long? So I'm going to guess that this is what he's talking about, because I don't have the picture here, but this is what he's trying to talk about. Is this going to be, will it fit 4 centimeters long? So we have to find out what the length is. Well, if we know that this side is 6, that's the hypotenuse. I'm going to draw it over here so it's not in the corner anymore. We know this side is 6. That's the hypotenuse of this 30, 60, 90 triangle. So what is the short leg going to be? Remember, the short leg is always half of it. So we can say that we know that this part is going to be 3. And then to find out the height, or how long AB is, you could do Pythagorean theorem all you want. That is totally fine. You could do 3 squared plus h squared equals 6 squared. Totally fine with me. Or you could use a shortcut. Remember, the longer leg equals radical 3 times the short leg. So all this is going to be is 3 radical 3. And I know that's hard to compare with the 4, but if you punch it into your calculator, you're going to get 5, and that's like 5.2 centimeters long. Okay, so Josh will attach the fastener. Will the fastener fit if it is 4 centimeters long? Well, the 4 centimeters long is going to be way too short. It's going to be right here. So I'm going to say no, that the fastener will not fit. I guess we don't want our ornamental pin to fall off. So the important thing that you get is that the length is going to be 5.2, the length of the long leg. Ta-da! Okay, we're going to talk about these way more, because I know 30, 60, 90 triangles and 45, 45, 90 are just so special and also a little confusing sometimes.